Okay, welcome everybody. I just realized that my opening slide says 8 a.m. and it's 9 a.m. That's because we have a special end of year website Wednesday and wanted to include our design manager, Julianne Hamilton, who is joining me today for a little bit of a wrap up. We like to use this time, as anybody who's been paying attention to this broadcast, to focus on sites and trends and launches. So we thought now was as good a time as any before people really start to check out for the holidays to just reflect a little bit. We made a tough decision to handpick a handful of sites from the last year to highlight some of our some of these trends and just take a minute to look at a nice range of designs and approaches, and it's always fun to just kind of take a peek back, because the amount of work and design that goes into each one of these, and also the range is always very impressive and fulfilling and satisfying. And so, in any case, meet Julianne. How's everything, Julianne?
Doing good. I'm here in Baltimore.
So tell us, before we jump in here, tell us a little bit about your role at Finalsite.
Sure. So I was a designer for several years at Finalsite. Did a lot of on-site trips with clients in person, and still do that a little bit. And now I oversee our team and try to keep up with all these trends.
So the question that I think about when you're talking about a creative process and these trends is, do you encourage your team, or do you spend time researching trends, or do the trends kind of emerge, or how does a trend become a trend in your mind, or how does it happen this way?
Yeah, well, definitely both. I think this is something everyone on the team is sort of thinking about all the time. Everyone always wants to kind of outdo themselves and their last site. So they're always thinking about how things can be better and more interesting. So we also do get together and kind of talk about some of this a bit formally. So last week we talked about some of the trends, and we have a UX committee, user experience committee, and kind of ran through some of these and decided which we really wanted to focus on. I think they really come from the world. They come from how we're experiencing the web, the devices we're experiencing it on, things that are going on kind of as broader cultural shifts, and we see how those kind of inform design. So things that maybe new technological advances kind of allow for us to do, those become possibilities. And so we start seeing them more and more, like, for example, immersive motion, as our speeds get quicker and our developers have ways to do things without using quite as much load time, then we're able to kind of bring more motion in. I think we're going to see, I'll jump right ahead to graphic details.
Okay.
Skipping ahead, but it's kind of a good example of how do we get there? Mm-hmm. I think in this year, we've had fewer opportunities to have maybe all of the photography that we would want of our students.
Right.
That's true for our industry, but kind of in a lot of spaces, we don't have the photographic representation of what our world usually is. And so I think we're seeing more graphic details, more illustrations, and kind of other elements to support the energy of a space where maybe a photo can't do it alone.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought much about that, and but you're right. This is a year unlike any other, and of course that impacts design and what's available to schools, and so and to your point about animation and motion, I'm curious how designers, for those of us who don't design, like myself, how do you, and we're going to see some really awesome animation and motion, as you refer to it, but how do you mock that up? How do you sort of, I'm used to the old school kind of Photoshop mock-ups, but nowadays, how do you anticipate interactivity and present that?
Oh, we've moved beyond Photoshop, Angelo. We are using a tool called Figma now. Yep. And It's a great tool. It's been great for our team in general. It's more collaborative than Photoshop. It's almost like the Google Docs of designing, because it's sort of all in the browser and you can kind of interact together in there. But it also allows for a lot more, we call it prototyping. You can see things that are more realistic. You can kind of add some of those animations into the initial mock-ups. There are some things that are harder to show though, and that we have to use examples or describe, or just hope that our clients can follow our train of thought and trust us enough to let us try something that maybe has never been done before.
So like just to pick up on an example, this is Millfield School in the UK, and before I sort of launch into scrolling through the site and showing everybody, before you even go anywhere on the site, if you click on that, you get this fun little overlay. And so is that what you mean? And you can sort of mock that up for a client easily with Figma?
Well, not so easily, but we can do it. Yeah, we can do it.
So maybe before we jump into that, maybe just, is there anything else you'd like to touch on with regards to these trends that you've selected?
Sure. So something that we're seeing some more of, and I really hope we see even more of, are alternatives in the hero, in that first impression you get, the first view of the site on your homepage. We call that the hero. So we see, and we still do see, a lot of slideshows of photos and videos, but we're starting to see some different things, and we're really seeing this a lot in other industries. And I think that there are some reasons we know from user experience testing that our users don't look through every slide. So if there are really important messages, we want to make sure that they aren't dependent on a user getting to slide 7 in your slideshow. And I think that there's also maybe just a desire to see something fresh, up there. It's a big opportunity. So thinking about, and this kind of ties into the 5th goal of goal-based design, 5th trend of goal-based design, that like, what are we really trying to accomplish? And, are we using that space in the best possible way to accomplish that goal? Immersive motion, kind of already touched on, but that would be kind of more than just little interactions, but also motion that kind of flows with the entire page. So I think we're just seeing motion go further and further, and that's partly because we can, partly because we've seen that people enjoy that experience. Vibrant color schemes, that's something we're seeing, and I kind of picked some sites that really showed that off here, where I think people are getting a little more adventurous with their branding. We have our brand colors, but we can add some really exciting accents, or maybe we want to pair them with something dark in the background and really make photos pop in that dark background. And then I mentioned graphic details. I hope we do see more of that. It would be like, I think every school knows that it's so important for them to get great photography. But, and they kind of contract to get maybe their view book or prospectus, and they have their logo, but I don't know how much everyone's thinking right now about getting kind of a set of other visual assets that they can use in those print materials and with us if they were working on their website.
So by graphic details, just with this little screen capture here of Millfield, would that include this little, threesome of icons and the thin rule? Is that what you mean by graphic details?
Sort of. It could include some of that. We can also get those. We are pretty capable of sourcing and creating kind of icons and small graphic details, and maybe like more like larger shapes. And you see some of that on Millfield once we get into it.
Yep. Particularly Print Academy, when we get there, that one really jumps out.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. It definitely does. And it kind of really makes the site. And then goal-based design is just always so important. We kind of included some version of this in our trends for a number of years. I think I can't express strongly enough how important it is for a site to be designed with intention. You know, I think the sites that are most interesting are solving interesting problems. So if you have something specific that you're trying to deliver messaging wise, or the clearer a school is on what sets them apart and how they kind of how they want to present themselves, the more interesting the design tends to be.
So how would this may be an impossible question to answer, but how, if I'm a school listening, like how would I know if my design is not goal oriented? Like what would be signs to you that that's an issue to really solve?
I think like if someone were to ask you why something was on the site and you couldn't answer it clearly, you didn't have a great answer to why. Or maybe the answer was like, because somebody in a different department asked you to put it there. Or if the answer, is valid, but doesn't support, if you were to kind of answer, what are you really trying to do as a school? And then that part of the site didn't support that answer, then you'd have a goal, but maybe if your goal is to increase enrollment and the reason that something is on your site doesn't do anything for that goal, then there's like a misalignment.
So, just sort of slowly scrolling through here, there's so many nice things about this design. The little touches of color, I think, touches on one theme that you mentioned. The overlay over the piece, the graphic. I don't know if this is part of their shield. It just was.
Yeah, it is. There,
okay.
I think. Mm-hmm.
And then you've got really clear, because of this muted dark background, these really impressive color photos that are so sharp just pop. And then as you continue to scroll, you get this nice collage of news and events, all with very obvious calls to action that pick up on the color set that we see throughout the site. But as you're looking through this, Julian, what are some things that really jump out to you as trends or things that are worth taking?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things. And I think you also notice as you're scrolling slowly through it, how everything is sort of appearing on the page, sort of like there's that fluid motion. So the entire site kind of invites you to keep going as things appear on scroll there. And I do really like how you can see kind of their more classic colors, that blue, red, and green paired with that kind of like really exciting modern feeling green at the top. I think that probably does a really good job of showing, that they're really like a forward thinking school, and they have a long tradition, but they also have
I think it really, now that you mention it, I hadn't noticed that this color really is a variant. This is not one of these three. Mm-hmm. And it does break out of the mold, but it really works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a small detail, but I think it actually really goes a long way. And it's something that I think when schools are open to it, it's often really successful. But sometimes it can be like hard to imagine a color that you don't see as part of your traditional palette. Yeah.
And then those colors play out, in some of these larger blocks of backgrounds. But this is definitely one of the best examples that I've seen of really telling a full story. And you're right, I hadn't really picked up on the idea that the way that the subtle animation occurs, you can't help but continue just because of the emergence of something new that's just below the fold that you know what I mean? And it just really does work. And I really love this presentation with the country and the location of the school and the nearby airports. I mean, how smart is that?
Yeah, I love it too. It's very spacious. They're not afraid in general to give enough room for all of the content and the storytelling.
Now, how does this, how does the design team think about mobile when it comes to these sort of design?
Yeah, throughout the whole process, it's something that we have regular design critiques within our team, and it's something that we're always looking at there. Like we never want to just look at we always look at them kind of simultaneously, or talk about them simultaneously in those critiques. So that we're looking at both what we're going to do responsively on a particular site, but also just like what are we seeing as mobile trends.
And there are lots of other things that are maybe don't fall into the trend zone that, or the trends list, but really to me are important for a high quality design. Like just having this kind of statement, I just think is, there's just lots of sites that sort of forget this or don't quite do it all the way, so that people just, in one sentence know who the school is and who they serve. And the other thing I noticed that I've been on the site a bunch is even little details like this, where you've got, this nice social media presentation with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and then they follow us, which also appears on the footer, is here too. So it's just like a thoughtful connection that is getting made for the user to say, look, if you like what you see, you can also follow us right away. And I think those conveniences can really add up.
Yeah, I think they've really thought through like their user journey there. Like if they want someone to be able to accomplish some goal or take some action, they don't have any barriers for them to get there.
And I don't know how this fits into your trends, but I always, if I scroll down and then I scroll back up, the nav, it's really nice. That's a nice user touch that if I'm scrolling down, I'm scrolling down, so I don't need to navigate from the top or get to the top. But as soon as I start to scroll back up, I may. And does that kind of thing part of your conversations, or how does that evolve like that?
Yeah, navigations are big. They can take so much more time than anyone would expect. The header and the footer and the navigation, because it's just so important. So we're definitely looking at different kind of models and strategies and what's working best there. I like that too. And of course, there's so much that makes a good site that's not encompassed by three bullet points. And that definitely is one of them.
Well, let's hop to Marin Academy. So how about I scroll slowly and you can talk a little bit about some of the trends that you're seeing imagined here?
Sure. So we're definitely seeing right away a lot of immersive motion, some really exciting color palettes, and also I think just a really great goal-based storytelling. I love how they present their sections as questions. I just think that is so just so much more engaging. I think it treats the person interacting with their site differently from the beginning. It invites them to be an active participant in viewing this and thinking about the content. These triangle shapes come from their logo, and they've kind of been brought to life here in a way that I think is really reflective of the school's kind of their character, their energy.
Yeah, it's fun. It's not intrusive. It just kind of adds this kind of quality to the design. It's a unique. That's a really beautiful picture.
And I think it's great that they were focused. Like this isn't the longest site. They don't they know who they're talking to. They're talking to their prospective audiences. They have call to actions to inquire, visit, and apply. They answer questions. Why do we push educational boundaries? And they jump right into that rather than falling into a trap where maybe they feel that they have to lead with upcoming events or that they have to have infographics because the school next to them has infographics. Not that infographics are bad, but they picked their content because they wanted to answer these questions.
Yeah.
How does learning come to life? Our team this is a great example of having interesting design problems to solve, which has led to an interesting design. Because we're going to solve the problem is how do we showcase how our learning comes to life versus we would like to have a section of infographics and then we would like a scrolling college slider. Again, those could be absolutely perfect for someone's goals, but it should be there because it's solving their problem, solving their, accomplishing their goals.
Right. But not only that, I think you've got, in this particular example, when you ask the question, how does learning come to life? For a lot of schools, it may be that they say something like, rigorous academics or close faculty relationships, things that all schools hope to have and share. But I really like that Marin Academy has picked these 4 pretty unique things, conference on democracy, outings, blended, lit fest. And so that, because it sort of just said, look, we've got the things that you would expect to have in a high profile, high quality school like ours, but these are some really interesting ones where we take learning to the next level. And so when you have that collaboration with a client, I'm sure that makes it much more interesting for the designer too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also like how these, the triangles play out, but they also, I would imagine, led to kind of that angle of the photo, which creates an interesting view instead of all the normal kind of right angle boxes.
Yeah, definitely. There's a holistic design sensibility to it.
Yeah. Cool. So let's hop to Kansas City Public Schools. What I always find impressive about district websites, particularly big districts like Kansas City Public Schools, is knowing how much there is to think about and communicate with a school. In this case, I think they serve, 40,000 students maybe. I mean, there are so many schools in the district that even this navigation is worth looking at as an example of how to take a very long list of things and break it up into 4 buckets and make it accessible. And so, but what I really like about this district is, this district website is that it breaks a bunch of rules, but it doesn't do it in a way that I think sends the site backwards or sideways. It just creates a very energetic, interesting experience. Starting with, for instance, even the navigation, the primary navigation is at the bottom, which to me is a pretty interesting solution for the fact that, they've already got some things they really want to have up at the top. Primarily select a school, which is probably one of the most important navigations to get right for parents. But you've got some utility, but then, for district navigation, which is for some portion of the user, but not all, it's still here, and then it shows up at the top as you scroll. And even the little sort of news and social panel, I think, is a nice way to capture some of that, recently updated stuff without it crowding what is, to me, a really terrific video montage. But what I think struck me too was, there's the navigation at the top showing, is just the way that the messaging gets designed out to, and how it plays out in different ways using these different devices. So, as you scroll, you see these big words, these big keywords really driving the design, and then examples of those keywords through these little interactive overlays. But really not a huge, long homepage like Millfield, but still capturing a lot. What are some of the things that you see, Joanne?
Yeah, I think the way they play with typography is really fun. It almost becomes that graphic element for them that just brings another layer of detail. I think that's what really sets apart a very custom site like this, that that layer of unique elements. I would love to talk about the navigation a little more too, because I do really like that. I think that you said they're kind of rule breakers, and we kind of say like, oh, we can only really manage like 7 or 8 items, but because they chunk them into different groups, I'm actually managing like, way more, because they're in these sections that my brain can digest. I can look at each area and kind of make sense of it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Really nice. I think that, again, this site does a really good job of being goal-based. I think for a district especially, it can be really hard for them to decide what information do we want to present? How do we want to present ourselves? They definitely are very aware of like their community's kind of informational needs.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, I guess, still presenting those. They're still making sure that those are there. The news and social is right there on the side. You can get everywhere you need to go. You can get to these free breakfast and lunch, but they're not losing the opportunity to talk about who they are, how they care, and kind of sort of, why should you be going here versus looking at, local private school? What does what does the public school district offer, and what kind of organization are they?
Yeah, I really like this statement by the
Mm-hmm.
superintendent. I think it's the right, it's just a very compelling kind of message about how they see their own calling and mission. So, yeah, just a really neat site, and even more impressive to me because it's such a big district. So it's, I'm sure there was a lot to keep things contained and, curated and all of that, with so much to try to blast out. But hopping to a different site, maybe you can start on this one, Julian.
Sure. So I think this one is, I'm so impressed with this one, and kind of really bravo to this school, because this is actually one of our theme designs. And they just did such a beautiful job with their content, with these really exciting graphic elements, the way they're treating their photography there. It looks so unique. And they've got really fun color scheme. They have really picked, I think, some really strong numbers and strong messaging. So they were able to kind of use that theme to get across their goals. And you can just see right away kind of who they are, what they're about. And they feel definitely very different than, most schools we look at. What do you
Yeah,
think, Angelo?
this is an example of, how to take this grid, which is a pretty common setup in design, but certainly in school design, where there's some grid of, call it distinctions or special programs or whatever. They can definitely tend to look alike from one site to the next, but I think this is an especially good example of how to avoid that, particularly because of what you mentioned, Julianne, and taking some interesting approach to photography and silhouetting against a really different color palette. And it's not just a solid color; it sort of has this like splatter of red against, I'm not sure, this rust, and so it's just visually very interesting, and a little I don't know what the word is, kind of it's like a pattern, and so it breaks up those solid colors that we get a lot of, and then but the pictures are cool too. Not only that, so you've got a student athlete looking right at the camera, and then you have this picture, which is really an interesting one, and then you've got action, sort of, this student musing in a fun way, and the cute boy, and so you've got this nice mix, and so it doesn't necessarily need to be complicated. It just needs to have some creative drive and risk taking to a degree.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell that they treated that set of graphics and graphic details kind of with the same intention as the photography in general. They, I think a lot of our schools have gorgeous photography, but we don't see quite as many that make sure they also have kind of exciting graphic elements to work with.
Yeah. So really nice. And I agree that I was excited to see a school really jump take a theme and really sort of kick it up a notch with this unique color scheme and use of photography. So it's really a great example of that.
Yeah.
So we're going to hop to Legacy Early College, which is a charter school, and I'm going to refresh so you can get the video going. And this really pops for me, the combination of this kind of gold transparency that sits on, sort of warms up the whole video montage, which is good. You know, if you're watching, you can see that it's not filled with students and stuff. You know, there's clearly in and of itself, without this overlay, it probably wouldn't be what I'd use to feature. But because of it, and because of the size of Your Legacy, and Your Legacy begins here, and these big buttons, and then you get some slideshow pictures, it really works, and it just draws you in. And you know, the site starts to emerge with the use of the mascot, I guess, and these subtle interactive letters that talk about their values. And so those little bits of animation, and then the site starts to continue to tell the story. But while, you know, what are some things that you noticed, Jeremy?
Well, I really picked this site because it was one of the examples of a school that was willing to break the mold for that hero area, and not just have a slideshow. So rather than a slideshow that maybe goes 1, 2, 3 through these main points, they were like, okay, this is what we really, really want our people coming to our site to be able to do. We want them to be able to join us, want them to be able to donate, want them to enroll. And so we're not going to hide that at all. We're going to make that is what we're doing as our first kind of view of the site.
Yeah.
I think it's nice. I think it's really nice. There are a few schools that have done variations of this idea where they still have a big image, because a big image is compelling, you know, some kind of big image or video, but then they let the user explore other features.
And sort of to the, I guess, related to the other point of when we're looking at Millfield, where as you scroll, you see something else that you want to see more of, and so it encourages users to continue to engage. And I sort of put in the same category in a different way, which is you get a full testimonial from an alum, and then a little bit of the next one, and so it's hard not to want to continue and see more.
Yeah, and we see more of that, and we see more of that on mobile too, showing the next slide. In general, I don't know off the top of my head if we're doing that one on Legacy, but in general, like that's a trend we're doing more and more, where you see a bit of the next image there. And that we've found that really increases users' engagement, makes them a lot more likely to click, because like I mentioned before, like slideshows aren't quite as interacted with as we wish that they were. We who put everything we want into a slideshow. So I think something like a testimonial is a good thing to have in a slideshow, because the message they're trying to get across isn't necessarily dependent on you clicking through every single one of them in a testimonial. It's more like, you liked reading that, you can continue.
And these are a nice little set of icons. Do you happen to know the background on these?
You know, I actually don't, but I agree that they're nice. And I think that something else I like about them, not just that they, the icon part themselves, but the way they invite you to kind of explore as a user. Like there's a playfulness to it, and there's an interactivity.
Yeah, and it's very, it's you know, it's very, I don't know what the word, specific, I guess. You know, they clearly have thought through these things in a way that they're, you know, that's very deliberate, and I like that. So I think that's that's cool. And this whole idea of wellness, is definitely an important, has growing importance in schools in terms of student well-being. So yeah, really, really nice site. I like the purple and the gold.
I do too.
Now we're going to hop to a large international school, UwC Southeast Asia, and there's lots to look at in this site and good examples of almost everything. But you want to kick it off, Julianne? Since you went to Singapore and worked on it with the school.
I did. I don't get to work so closely with our clients anymore, but this was an exception recently and it was so fun. This school, UwC SEA, really knows who they are and what they wanted to get across. So I think that part, again, being really goal-based, led to some really interesting and different content on their page. And we talked a lot about that, like where they wanted to be unique versus where they didn't want to be different just for different sake. They still wanted to make sure that kind of how we were presenting information was usable and got across their goals. But it's very lively and interactive. Like if you open up that plus in the yellow bar on the side of that image there, you can get more information about any of these topics. But I think something really successful also about this site is that they do have incredible photography and they give it enough breathing room. Like both with the amount of white space around it, but also with the scale of each sort of part of the page. And by maybe the decision to place text kind of in these overlays versus darkening the images. The images are all like very, very bright, which is reflective of kind of their school's vibe.
Yeah, and these,
it's an interesting section, isn't it? Like these thinking big pieces.
And if you look, if you kind of keep this in your head and then you go back to here, it really gives you a good example of you're accomplishing the same general user goal of, you've got a handful of things that you want to talk about, but you don't want to do it in a linear way. You want to make it a little bit interactive. And this one is a list, whereas this one is a series of a little grid of boxes. And so the goal is the same, but they're different design approaches, and they're both really strong. And I really, when I think about this panel alone, it's sort of its own little mini website. There's just content and images and interactivity and navigation. I mean, I would imagine that the design of this, was its own effort to think through and make. And it even has a little, I don't know if the animation will continue to, but even the animation of the word thinking, the word big coming together, and then tying to the little descriptive text with the call to action is really just really neat.
Yeah, Holly did a beautiful job with this. I think that was UwC SEA, we talked about things like some of the pitfalls of slideshows. That was part of what led to the list or that grid view. Like we have more than one thing we want to feature here, but if we know that our users aren't going to click through a slideshow, then how else can we present this? So again, it was kind of because we wanted to solve this problem, we came up with this solution.
And it's nice how these, the colors are, I really like the palette overall, and it plays out in different ways. Here's the social media, which is nice. This idea of these simple vertical reveals is implemented in different ways, but it's what's nice about it is that I would assume once you kind of educate the user at whatever point it happens, that these do something that then they don't have to learn it over and over again throughout the site. I was eager to get to this too. I mean, this is really just just a nice layout, and conveys a huge amount of information. And so it just was really impressed by the at a glance.
That one took a lot of time to get right.
I bet. Here's your interactive rollovers, and then a really nice footer. And with that, I think that was the first time. I just noticed that those little push pins light up when you roll over East and West Campus, or East and
Yeah.
West Campus.
Little details, right?
But this is awesome. This is a big school. They've got a lot. They've got a handle with two full campuses, and so each of these links, they're pretty far apart. So how does that work, Julian? Do they have students going back and forth, or how does?
No, you're a student at one or the other campus, and that was actually huge talking point when I was there with them, was how do we make this clearer and easier. That's sort of why, if you go back into either one of them, Dover or East Campus, pin there, they even need separate information about some of the curriculum. Like some languages are offered only at one and not at the other. So we had talked a lot about what can overlap versus what needed to be separated out. And they are one UWC SEA, but you are only attending one or the other. You're applying to one or the other. So they did really need to both talk about who they were holistically, but also they kind of talk about the schools as siblings.
Okay.
Like they and like a sibling, they have the same background, they have the same parents, they have the same upbringing, and a lot of things in common, but they also have their own unique personalities.
Yeah.
And so it was also important that someone coming to this site be able to get that from one or the other campus to make their kind of decision on where they would want to apply.
Interesting. I'm sure a challenge every day in some respects, but they do a nice job tying them both together. I also really like the search. It has the search, but it also has a mini version of quick links here, and then a mini version of quick links here. I think it's just very user centric. So
yeah,
just a really nice job. But this site in particular, I think, has just a lot going on, and you can kind of immerse yourself. We haven't really touched on the interiors, but certainly this site I know is strong on the interior as well, with some really nice designs and layouts. So
yeah,
really nice. Well, I think that's our list. Anything we didn't touch on with your list of trends, Julian?
No, I mean, there's always more to say, but I think that'll cover it for today.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time. And this is our last Website Wednesday for the year. And I hope that everyone has a safe and relaxing holiday. And we will kick it off in January 2021. I can't believe it. So thanks, everybody. And thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.